Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers. My name is Sean, and today we got to talk about this episode of Piers Morgan Uncensored, where he put together a panel in order to debate the trans athletes issue. Now, of course, the setup for this panel, the setup for this debate, is that you had a high school track race. In that high school track race, a transgender individual, male to female, ended up absolutely dominating the racers, and the crowd, the people that were watching it, decided that they were going to greet this athlete with boos because people are sick of this. They're sick of biological men dominating female sports, and obviously this backlash has produced fertile grounds to have one of these stupid panels. Now, of course, the lefties are absolutely unbearable on this panel. We have Francesca Fiorentini, who is a guest host on TYT a lot. She's absolutely awful, and that's why we're going to go over this, because it's kind of hilarious to see these people flail around, have no arguments at all whatsoever, and then claim that your positions, being logical and fact-based, are going to lead to untold numbers of deaths of transes, because that's really all they can pivot to. Now, we're going to get into this, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who signed up over at actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
And remind you that this show is available in podcasting form.
Teenage runner Aiden Gallagher became the Oregon girls 200-meter state champion last week, posting one of the fastest times in the state's history with a remarkable display of power and stamina. But as Aiden crossed the finish line, something, pretty unusual happened. Instead of joyous cheering and adulation, many of the watching spectators loudly booed.
So Piers Morgan gives his little intro to this whole segment. It actually ends up leading to a very long monologue. I will link the entirety in the description so you could check it out. And this ultimately ends up leading to Tomi Lahren making some statements about this whole situation. So we're going to cut to that, because that is what's going to lead us to Francesca Fiorentini's first ridiculous try to counter without countering kind of point.
Yeah, I also think that it's big that this happened in a place like Oregon. Oregon is not conservative, maybe certain parts, but certainly the majority of Oregon is certainly more on the left side. So I think the fact that the crowd is saying, hey, this is unacceptable, that's a big moment. But we just have to stop denying this, Piers. I mean, the silent majority, and I would agree that the majority, actually, the more vocal majority now, is saying that this is absolutely ludicrous. And listen, I think we need to stop talking about biological men competing against biological women in women's sports. This is a trans person, a trans woman competing against actual women. Stop dismissing women by calling us biological women. We are just women.
Now, Tomi Lahren basically says, hey, look, it's Oregon. This is a very left-wing place, and even they've had enough with this. This is the silent majority speaking out. And the fact of the matter is, most people know intuitively that having biological males in female sports completely undermines the whole purpose of female sports. We said this before, but I will reiterate it again. The purpose of male sports, also known as sports, is to have the absolute maximum in terms of competition. The purpose of female sports is deliberately to reduce competition so that it is only biological females competing, and that is because if you were to throw them in with the men, they would not do well. If you were to throw men in with them, the men would absolutely dominate. So the whole entire purpose of female sports is to limit competition to females, and people have a problem with this because, biology and all that is a social construct. Just transes, don't be a transphobe.
I think about, what if your 12-year-old kid was Aiden? Wouldn't that be incredible? Wouldn't you be proud of Aiden?
No.
And how much would it...
No.
So I like that Francesca tries to make the appeal to the parents on this particular panel, specifically to Piers Morgan, saying, look, what if your kid was the transes kid? What if your kid was the biological male that transitioned to a female and absolutely dominated, smoked, humiliated the females? Wouldn't you be proud? And Piers right away says, no. Absolutely not. No way. I would not be proud of him. It is expected that he would beat these women. It is expected that he would beat these girls. And obviously, this is making the competition unfair. And Francesca already, right off the bat, just ran into a bulldozer. And again, Piers Morgan got a ton of problems with him on a bunch of different issues. But the fact of the matter is, he shut down this whole line, and I hesitate to call it reasoning, but of reasoning from Francesca Fiorentini right off the bat.
Absolutely Unless that child had not even reached puberty and in the case of my daughter, for example.
Now, this is where I totally disagree with Piers Morgan. He says, unless that child had not gone through puberty or whatever, and the fact of the matter is, this is a disgusting position to hold, because we should not, in any way, shape, or form, prevent children from going through puberty in order to satiate the transes who want to transition kids before they hit puberty. What we've seen through countless studies in Scandinavia is that a lot of people who have gender confusion, it tends to alleviate naturally when they go through puberty, because all those hormones and all those biological changes tend to set people right from their childish ideals. So I completely disagree with the direction that Pierce is going in, because it suggests an alternative that's actually worse than letting the males compete against the females in terms of track or whatever, which is not having people go through their natural puberty in order to satiate the gender ideologues like Francesca Fiorentini.
This is what's crazy about it. Do you think that that's what's driving trans women to compete as athletes, is that they're like, if I transition to become a woman, I can win a gold medal in a high school track and meet competition.
Well, no, hang on, Francesca. I don't care.
That is so absurd to me. It's the same thing. Hang on, let me speak.
I don't care. The reality is they're doing it, right? And the point is that, to me, the answer is obvious.
They're not doing it to win a medal. They're doing it because that is their identity.
But they're winning medals at the expense of actual women who can't compete with them physically.
So theoretically, the structure of this show is supposed to be a panel where 4 different people debate these issues. You got 2 people on the correct side of this issue. You have 2 people who are saying, oh, the transes need to be able to compete in women's sports because reasons, whatever, who cares? But the problem is that Francesca Fiorentini, who is allegedly a comedian, is so dumb in her argumentation that everything she says right off the bat ends up getting completely shut down by Piers Morgan immediately. And a perfect example is this right here. She's like, do you really think that they're transitioning in order to win a high school gold medal? That's not the point. That's not the purpose of the conversation. What we're talking about is whether or not it makes sense for biological males to compete in female sports, when we know for a fact the whole point of female sports is to limit competition to females. So the motivation behind the transition doesn't matter at all whatsoever. And I also want to point out that Francesca's being completely disingenuous, because in reality, when you decide to actually question these people, what they'll tell you is that there is no objective standard for transition. So what that means is that if you say you're a woman, no matter what, these people buy into it and they think you should be granted the full rights, privileges, and immunities. Right now, they're hiding behind rules that would be in the Olympic Committee or any of these sporting organizations. But if you actually press them, they would say those rules doesn't matter. If you identify in a way, you should be able to compete, whether you take hormones or not.
I'm embarrassed to be a woman when I see women freaking out about trans women winning one out of so many competitions.
It's not just one.
Okay,
it's happening in swimming with Leah Thomas. It's happening in all sorts of sports.
So Francesca tries to pivot and say, oh, I'm embarrassed as a woman. Let's be clear. Francesca Fiorentini is nowhere near an athlete. She labels herself a comedian. She's nowhere near that either. And she says, oh, it's absolutely embarrassing that all these women are panicking over trans people winning one medal. But it's not one medal. They try this trick over and over again. But what we see time and time again is that this keeps happening. It's happening at an increasing rate. And again, the point isn't how many times it happens. The point isn't how many incidents you could point to. The purpose of female sports is to limit competition to biological females, to limit competition. It is not the equivalent of male sports in any way, shape, or form, which is trying to maximize competition. She can't address that. So instead, she says, oh, this makes women seem so weak that they want the sports that are set aside for them to be set aside for them.
Yes, because it makes us look really pathetic, honestly. It makes us look like losers and whiners. And guess what? I'm not a loser or a whiner.
No, Francesca, to be clear, you are definitely 100% unambiguously a loser and whiner. And in fact, what you're going to do right now is prove that and whine at the same time. It's actually going to be amazing.
You know what I actually want to talk about when it comes to women's sports? Why is Caitlin Clark being paid 80 times less than her counterpart entering the NBA?
Well, that's quite straightforward too.
Because nobody watches it.
So right there, Francesca Fiorentini goes for the NPC maneuver. She says, oh, why don't we talk about why Caitlin Clark isn't being paid as much as her NBA counterpart? She's being paid 80 times less. And immediately, Piers Morgan says there's a very straightforward explanation for that. You have this woman jump in and say nobody watches it. But to be clear, the reason Caitlin Clark isn't being paid as much as her NBA counterpart is because Caitlin Clark is not the counterpart to any player in the NBA. Any player in the NBA is better than Caitlin Clark, not by a little bit, but by a lot. The fact of the matter is the WNBA is not a counterpart to the NBA. It is essentially a tax write-off for the NBA, in that the NBA actually generates billions of dollars of revenue, while the WNBA loses money each and every year. Nobody watches these games. There's basically no interest. The competition level is nowhere near the level that you see in the NBA, which attracts players from across the world in order to play in it, and the WNBA can't even get people to go to their games for free. And believe me, I've known this because I've been offered tickets to the Liberty, which is the WNBA team that plays in New York City, and I've never went ever, even when they were offered to me for free. Maybe if they would have offered me a free meal on top of that plus transportation, I would have considered it, but even then I probably wouldn't have went to a WNBA game. They sell no tickets, they generate no revenue, they're always losing money each and every year, and on top of that, the WNBA Players Association negotiated these deals based on the limited revenue available in their league. So to be clear, there is no WNBA counterpart to an NBA player, and if Caitlin Clark actually does draw attention to the league, if she actually makes the endorsements that she's receiving viable, good on her, but she is still not anywhere close to a NBA player. In fact, one of the craziest articles that I saw actually compared Caitlin Clark to Steph Curry. Now, Steph Curry is not the greatest basketball player of all time. He may be the greatest shooter of all time, but he's not the greatest basketball player of all time. But Steph Curry, in his play style, at his size, completely revolutionized the NBA. There are very few players who can completely change how a professional league at the caliber of the NBA is played, but Steph Curry did it with his three ball, with his size, and by the way, he's insanely popular because unlike the LeBrons or the Shaqs or all these mega giants that kids can't see themselves as being, Steph Curry is relatively short for an NBA player. He looks like a kid with his baby face, so he's also insanely marketable in comparison to this WNBA player who just showed up yesterday. So all these stupid articles trying to make the case that Caitlin Clark is entitled to more when she's actually done absolutely nothing in the WNBA and nothing compared to the male counterparts and has no skill level that's even able to get her a bench seat in an NBA game is absurd in every possible way.
If I hit you over the head with a bat and I said the plan wasn't to kill you, it's because you had a fly in your head, would you still not go to the police for assault? Does my intention matter? Because that's exactly what you just said.
I'm just trying to Rube Goldberg whatever the hell it is you're saying.
That's exactly what you said.
So this one I'm going to leave as a question for you guys out there in the audience, because that analogy was pretty straightforward. It was asking whether or not intent matters or impact matters. And by the way, in a bunch of different scenarios for the left wing, they say intent doesn't matter at all. All that matters is impact. But here you have Francesca Fiorentini either being dumb or playing dumb, depending on how you want to look at it, pretending like she can't understand this, or maybe she can't understand this. Also, you have another guy who can't understand this as well, and this just goes to show you the limited capabilities that these lefties can actually deal with. And we've talked about this before, that left-wingers' inability or unwillingness to engage in hypotheticals really shows their lack of intellectual curiosity, and this is how you know we're going to pivot to, oh my god, what about the suicides? What about the suicides? Let me guilt you on the suicides because I have no counter-arguments.
We're trying to use
There's useful idiots like you that are leading to the death of trans people. I care more about human life and people actually. I care about the right to privacy. I care about the people surviving and living in this world. Yes, I do.
You don't seem to care about the right to privacy of biological women not wanting to share their spaces with biological men. What about them?
What about the number of trans youth who commit suicide every single year?
So, of course, like I said, Francesca Fiorentini had to take it there. And I just want to point out that this is an emotional blackmail kind of tactic. She has no arguments. She can't counter you in any possible way. So she decides to say, listen, these transes have taken themselves hostage, and unless you let my agenda run roughshod over the country, then they're going to kill the hostages. They're going to take their own lives. And I say absolutely not. And more importantly, if the deciding factor between whether or not you are going to take your own life is whether or not we actually keep female sports in the purpose and manner that they were intended, then you should seek mental health care. I don't want these people to lose their lives or anything like that, but the idea that we're going to cater to threats constantly is absurd in every possible way. The idea that we're going to cater to emotional blackmail is insane. Again, if you had a romantic partner that said, if you don't stay with me, I'm going to take my own life, we would call that that person an abuser and a manipulator. But in this particular case, we say, listen, all public policy needs to cater to these individuals under the threat that they will attempt suicide, and I'm not having it.
Guys, let's not bully, okay? I believe it was Melania Trump who said, be best. And we know what bullying leads to. Stephen Miller, okay?
You know what it is.
Okay, but
So if you ever thought there was nothing to Francesca Fiorentini, she showed it right there, where she says, oh, I think it was Melania Trump who said, don't bully, be better. And that's how you get Stephen Miller when you bully, because, you know, that's Francesca Fiorentini's comedy, referencing the evil orange man. She's talking to a bunch of Brits that don't have anything to do with the United States of America, but she still got to go, oh, orange man bad, orange man bad. Again, absolutely useless in every possible way, completely embarrassing in every possible way, and somehow this is one of the least embarrassing things, because Piers Morgan decides that he's going to put a bunch of different hypotheticals to Francesca Fiorentini, and she's going to bite on all of them.
would you allow him, if he said I'm a woman, to play in the American
You're
women's
using
national
the
team?
wrong pronoun
Yes, right now. Hell yeah, are you kidding me?
Wow.
Messi on the U.S. women's national team? Hell yeah.
Would you
because
allow
that would
Usain
mean-
Bolt to do that and be in the sprinting
Yes,
team?
because that would mean they're a trans woman. They identify as
I
women.
get it.
You would have to
So just to be clear,
transition.
you'd let Lionel Messi play in the women's national football team and destroy
Hell yeah,
women's football
welcome.
forever. You'd let Usain
it'd be
Bolt.
very difficult
hang on,
to get a
hang
ticket,
on.
which would suck.
I want to do a little checklist here. You'd let Usain Bolt compete as a sprinter in the American women's Olympic team.
Yes.
Okay. You would
Yes.
let Floyd Mayweather compete as a boxer in the women's American boxing team.
So first of all, Francesca Fiorentini, being the absolute ignoramus that she actually is, and unfunny person, doesn't point out that neither Lionel Messi nor Usain Bolt are actually Americans, so they wouldn't be able to play on the American team just based on that. But instead, she decides to bite on it and say, yes, one of the greatest soccer players in play right now, and the greatest sprinter in terms of speed, are eligible to play on the women's team if they identify as a woman, because, oh my god, gender ideology has corrupted my brain so much that I can't even think or process. And this is exactly the issue right here. And by the way, earlier on, and I might have missed this at this point in the video, we had one of these guys say that the person in the high school team ran the same speed as the winner in the women's normally does, therefore that's normal.
Most of the female winners in this sport, they are hitting around 22 to 24 seconds, which is exactly what the gold medalist won here. And then also following up with what you said.
What's your point? What's your
My
point?
point is, this is normal for a woman.
No, you're
This is
missing
the
out.
normal speed for a woman
No.
in a race.
You're
But
missing-
let's get back to what you're
No,
saying.
hang
You're
on,
talking
no.
about
Hang
women's
on.
safety.
Even though what he just proved out was the fact that the high school men's team is running at the caliber speed of the absolute top of the women, and thus that is the entire problem. So yeah, we have an absolutely ridiculous segment. I will link the whole thing in its entirety for you guys out there in the audience so you can check it out for yourself, but it just goes to show you how dumb, blind, and unreasonable these lefties actually are. Now, of course, I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you like this video, then show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Piers Morgan's trans athlete panel. Till next time.